Welcome back, BOMAQtalk. It's Friday, and this is the second hour. Keep up, keep up. I know we are spitting out a lot of content in this in these last couple days. Try to keep up with it. We're trying to keep up with it. We're giving it as we get it. So kind of chart with us as we plug through this. We discussed digital identities in the previous hour. We share these things in great detail for our young entrepreneurs and those who are reading our books. Another note on digital identity, and it is significant to mention the firm keeps a CapEx equipment and inventory list, right? Um, Always have. And now those present and future assets will be logged into COMCORE 8, right? So the assets, process, and life cycle outlined in the book, The Universal Language of Asset Lifecycle Management, is still applicable. The book outlined by chapter asset acquisition, continued use, and disposal. Those three areas uh, translate into this five-stage life cycle as well. So that we will discuss in this hour. The book stepped through the business as an asset, documented through vehicles like the Smart Biz Facts, business valuations, and written workflow processes, all of which will be worked into the design and use of COMCORE 8, right? So it will record tangible, intangible, non-traditional, and new technology asset classes, generating a various list of reports, right? That is, so it's a COMCORE 8 is a continuation of a study we've been doing almost a decade now. So um, just wanted to make those little connections so you can kind of see the build up, right, and the relevance of the continued relevance of the conversations that we're having, right? So BOMAQtalk, first Friday, second hour. This session discusses stage one uh, of the five-stage life cycle uh, that we have been explaining, right? And so which begins with creation, onboarding, and AI provisioning uh, risks, right? So, stage one, creation, the moment of onboarding. Yeah. So, in my work, I've onboarded employees as construction project manager to a division, part-time instructors as interim program director, workforce development participants as a business owner, um, advisory board members as a chairman of the executive committee, vendors, suppliers, subcontractors, and subconsultants as a project manager and signing agent, right? So in a traditional firm, day one provisioning means the can mean these three things: email, core apps, device access, right? Hardware. And a AI integrated firm, day one is 8 decisions because in addition to traditional provisioning, someone in most organizations, um, uh, in addition to traditional provisioning, someone in most organizations, nobody in particular needs to decide which AI tools does this person get access to at what permission level, connected to which data sources under whose account, personal or organizational, with what output ownership policy, and what disclosure applies if AI tools are used in their performance evaluation, right? So, and further in our chart, under creation, we got account spawning and baseline provisioning. Who owns the API? Who owns the API keys? over provision of AI tools, day one, AI ownership, privacy, right? So those are some of the things that should be considered. And most organizations are not making those decisions explicitly. They are being made by default by whoever the new hire asks first or by the path of least resistance, right? So that is the AI provisioning problem, and it compounds from day one in ways that make every later life cycle stage harder to manage, right? So, uh, and having navigated that process, um, not as an HR professional, right? So, working with HR professionals to onboard those onboarding experiences, um, and making sure all the needed paperwork and permissions and provisions um, were provided for a particular individual. Um, Understanding that process, uh, um, uh, understand the importance of making sure those processes still happen, but then they are extended to AI integrated firm or hybrid human AI organizational structures, right? So um, in the AI edition, there's this risk of over provisioning, right? So this over provisioning trap, giving a new identity because uh, it's um, a trail that you cannot see, um, a identity that isn't physical. It's non-tangible in in a way. We get into that tangible and non-tangible assets. I would say that this one is non-tangible. It's digital, right? And so because you can't see some of the if you're not understanding all of the entire system, and how to put in those guardrails and those boundaries, right? The security, safety, and those boundaries. You could give a new identity more access than that role requires, right? And it's more than just outlining where you would outline to a human. This is your role description. This is your job description. This is your role. Um, and um, and this is how it overlaps within the project team, right? So if it was that easy, and maybe we may create something that can do that, right? Um, uh, then we wouldn't have this trap, right? So giving a new identity more access than the role requires, this is a well understood problem for traditional credentials. The AI version has characteristics that make it faster and more dangerous, as we said. It's moving faster than you can think about uh, all of the uh, loopholes to which you um, have not constrained it, then it's doing a whole lot of things you don't even know about or whatever before you kind of thought about it, and able to catch it, right, at, at AI speed. You need AI audit to catch um, over provisioning traps at AI speed, right? So traditional over provisioning is passive. A person has access to files they don't need, unless they explore those files in, um, electronically. There's guardrails. Oh, you don't, the message will come up. You don't have permissions to access these files, or um, there are physical spaces, um, or um, certain software. Um, you can put a person. or a digital boundary um, that keeps that access dormant, right? And you can physically, in most cases, see it and digitally see it. Um, it's not immediately active and it can't really be exploited, right? There's the control is easier. AI over provisioning can be active from the moment of provisioning, right? So an AI agent granted broad API access and you didn't think about it, you don't really know the system. Uh, it doesn't wait to be directed to say, oh, okay, you are trying to figure it out. It's going to use that provision based on um, use that provision and any request that someone makes of it, it's going to use its provisions right away, the moment uh, of provisioning, right? And so it doesn't wait. Maybe a human might even ask, okay, so do I have access to this space? Or these files, or where can I find this and stuff like that? Well, AI is like, I know where it is, so I'm gonna go get it. And so an AI agent granted broad API access doesn't wait to be directed. It operates continuously within the scope of its permissions without even asking or checking or getting those checkpoints. So an AI tool given read access to a full shared drive, because that was the easy default when the integration was set up, maybe actively indexing, summarizing, and storing everything in that drive inside a third-party system right now without anyone noticing, right? So um, three additional characteristics make AI over provisioning harder to manage is that the AI tools are designed to request more access. So every integration request is framed as a user benefit. So, hey, come on, connect your calendar, connect your email, connect your documents. Each grant, seems like reasonable. Oh yeah, let's get this all connected. I guess to some. I like the firewalls between uh, my mobile phone and my laptop. So I don't have it easily connected, you know. Um, uh, for this same reason, before AI even came onto the scene, I was already putting in guardrails and firewalls in between um, uh, different pieces of a technology so that I could safeguard email, safeguard documents, right? Safeguard my calendar. Um, and so the aggregate is this deeply integrated AI system with access to almost everything assembled through these individual consent clicks that nobody tracked as a whole. So, secondly, that's firstly, AI integration permissions are not visible in standard identity management tools. We talked about that before. I am. When you review an access profile, you see app permissions, folder access, and system roles. You do not typically see the API permissions they have granted to AI tools through personal authorization flows, right? So that it's a blind spot, right? So you see app permissions, folder access, and system roles. You don't see API permissions that have granted the AI tools um, those flows, those workflows, those personal, those authorization flows, right? So, and then thirdly, AI agents can request access autonomously. So some agentic workflows request additional permissions as part of their operation. An AI agent tasked with managing a project may request access to relevant files, then communicate channels, then to the scheduling system. Each request is logged by the AI system. Very few organizations have a process for reviewing AI agent permission requests the way they review human access requests, right? So, um, in a lot of the project management software, there there may within the project management process, there may be a flag within the process that says, okay, you need a manager's position, uh, a manager's review right here for approval. You need approval for this budget change, or you need approval for different activities. And uh, this third area is suggesting that we're giving, we're trusting the AI agents um, to conduct some of these processes without those checkpoints. And it's just inherent in the way that they've been built in the system. Um, and so those over provisioning traps prevail um, and make it hard, make those areas harder to manage, right? And so looking for AI tools that assist you in managing um, those three areas and any over provisioning traps would be ideal, right? So again, just to reiterate, the risk isn't just that someone gets unauthorized access to a system. It's that once an AI agent has access, it can act at machine speed, scraping, summarizing, exporting data faster than any human can detect, right? So, category one AI agents' credentials are the highest velocity risk in the entire asset ecosystem, right? And reasonably so. So how do you respond to this? I would be uh, vet those AI tools um, to test them to see how well they're able to manage in those areas. Um, Similar to perhaps a job description or role definition that you have for human, have a role access blueprint that explicitly includes an AI section which models approvals for that role and what permission level connected to which data sources under organizational accounts, right? Not personal, with what output ownership policy. This blueprint is sort of your provisioning construction, but it serves the same way as a job description or a role description would for a human, in that it outlines uh, the requirements for that particular role, that task, um, and the responsibilities that that human would be accountable for. And so um, it's really a baseline, right? Uh, Role access, blueprint, you know, uh, for AI identities, something of that sort, right? That's really long, but um, creating something like that, I think would be a good governance response that would align with um, the systems that already work with um, human capital, right? Uh, I often call this AI capital. So we're talking about human capital. Um, I use human capital instead of human resources. So AI capital would be kind of appropriate here, right? So um, let's move on to AI onboarding inventory. Um, going through 8 categories. Um, this is the a complete onboarding asset inventory in an AI integrated firm, um, trying to document all 8 subcategories at the moment of creation, right? So let's BOMAQ talk it out, right? Let's walk this through, right? So category 1, access credentials. You need the email, core apps, device, SSH keys provisioned at defined permission levels. Category 1, AI agents, which AI platforms are provisioned at what permission level, connected to which data sources, under whose account. Document the answers. This is the first entry in the firm's AI credential registry. Category 2, work products, shared devices, or shared drives, code repos, client folders at appropriate access levels. Category 2, AI generations, access to the firm's prompt library, RAG knowledge base, and any fine-tuned models. And critically, the policy on ownership of AI outputs. Who owns the prompts this person develops? Who owns the synthetic media that generate using uh, the firm's tools? Who owns the fine-tuned model they contributed to? This must be documented and acknowledged on day one, not discovered in dispute, right? And so some of these things, well, most of these things would be outlined in a agreement of some sort, right? So uh, whether in all cases uh, that we discussed in previous, whether it was work development, whether it was part-time instructors, whether as a project manager onboarding project team members, advisory board, there is some kind of agreement. And within that agreement, these items are already outlined for human capital. And so there would need to be an additional um, line items for AI integrated situations, right? So, um, in thinking about this, as we were composing the independent sales representative just recently, composing the independent sales representative contract, re revamping the business relationship manager, which is an internal position, and revamping it to an independent sales representative, which is a external position, um, independent contractor, consultant position. We had to outline these things and for the human capital. But then we would need to add um, uh, the AI component uh, to those agreements as well, right? And so in the case of and those work products, credentials, work products, communication trails, and the corporate footprint are some of the things that would determine whether or not you're a BRM, which is an internal employee, or an external um, uh, um, consultant, right? Contractor, right? So this is the big caveat in contractor work now. So in these same areas, who controls it, who owns it, um, uh, who has oversight over these 4 areas, right? So um, category 3. So that was category 2. And then a little sidebar. So it's a Willie pack. Category 3, communication trails, email, Slack channels, calendar access. Category 3, AI context, which AI note taking, again, transcription tools are approved, right? Uh, we already document in project management, we document our communication with the owner, with subcontractors, with subconsultants. Um, that's part of the project file, right? That's part of the project management meetings, part of the project management documentation, right? And so uh, AI now is an addition to what we were doing already. So what is the disclosure policy for recording client meetings, right? So there is legal outset even when we were doing BOMAQtalk and having guests. Um, uh, Perhaps a decade ago, we were doing our Blog Talk Radio um, uh, interviews for the Universal Language of Management series. It hadn't developed yet. We were just doing research, doing research, talking to folks about industry concerns, industry areas of interest, and as part of that research, it evolved into books. But yeah, we for a couple of years we on Blog Talk Radio we would interview different industry professionals in the industries which we want to serve, and we had to have each of the guests sign off on that. Yeah, they know they were going to be recorded. We're going to, and these recordings would be um, uh, uh, public, would be able to listen to in public, and um, just getting all the permissions in place. There are legal statutes that say you can't record someone without asking them. And now we have our name, image, and likeness, contracts you can kind of sell and have a service or product where you're offering your name, image, and likeness for monetary gain. And so there's all kinds of, and rightfully so, I have to be mindful of that as well as I am in these meetings that um, uh, when someone's recording, that they're not going to use that at, to be harmful to me, to be harmful to the firm, to be harmful to um, the organization, right? And so um, I have control over my name, image, and likeness. And at times, or whatever, I have to decline it. I have to decline. No, you can't use my name, you can't use my image, you can't use my likeness, because of the infrastructure that we've built, right? So um, these permissions, for when BOMAC multimedia, in anything in production, public relations, um, uh, are, are pertinent, right? So where questions, where are AI summaries stored and under whose account? What is the retention policy for AI meeting transcripts, right? How long do you keep these items? Blog Talk, the conversations that we had for the research for the Universal Language of Management series turns out to be the research for it, right? So Blog Talk Radio uh, is no more, but we still have the recordings, right? And so we can revamp them and reuse them and repackage those, right? There's no statutes of limitation on that content, right? So it could be repurposed. And so every one of these things that we're talking about is a governance issue that the firm have to be accountable for with legal review needs and implications, right? If um, a decision is made badly, right? So um, just be mindful of that. Category 4, corporate footprint, the HR. You see, I don't like the word HR for some reason. I just don't like the word HR. So, for our core that has to do with people, I think that's what we call it, people. Um, we change that to human capital, right? So, um, human capital, um, and all the dynamics associated with onboarding humans, right? And we have parallel teams. Parallel teams are advisory teams, the executive committee. We have project teams, and um, we have the internal, external um, teams. The project teams consist of sub-consultant teams, project subcontractor teams. Subcontractor is usually a term used in construction. Subconsultant is used in all consulting areas. So where there's consulting services, um, there will be sub-consulting in those areas. And usually in the managed services, you'll see more subcontractor um, contracts because we're dealing with a lot of different areas. In the managed services, you got facilities, we got construction management, we got project management, we got hospitality management. A lot of those management areas require a team um, uh, to cover all of the areas of service delivery, right? So, um, yeah, so AI, adding AI to category 4, we have these AI logs, which AI productivity or performance monitoring tools, right? So uh, will be active for this role. What data will they generate? What is the retention policy for which jurisdictions, right? Because some of the things that are applicable in Texas, folks say you never have to go out of Texas for work. And that's somewhat true because there's so many areas um, uh, to which we are able um, to provide service through our industries. Um, our location in Ohio, we're constrained in some of those areas because of the jurisdiction that we're in. Some of the divisions uh, don't have full operations within Ohio, right? So understanding where you are in relation to some of these questions um, and monitoring the automated decision making of the AI and as it relates to regulations in those areas. So you have something set up where both teams are utilizing AI, but the guardrails, the boundaries, the safeguards would be different in one jurisdiction than they would be in the other, and being able to uh, monitor, control, and have some oversight on that, right? So that whether human or AI, uh, whether individual or AI tool, um, they need to be informed of that differentiation. right? And so, um, and then, in this category, those evaluations, how you evaluate performance evaluations, and different types of performance monitoring tools, making sure there's disclosure, and if there's a legal requirement to do so, right, as a courtesy, right? So, um, the AI onboarding inventory is the baseline from which every future audit, transition, and offboarding depends. Without it, you can't govern what you don't know you provisioned, right? So, um, organizations don't skip this step, spend days reconstructing the picture, right, at departure, right? And so, this is a work in progress for us internally. We're both Mac talking it out as is applicable to us, right? And um, so if you're not there, we understand. We're all gonna get there together. Uh, slowly but surely. Right. So day one, AI ownership conversation. Um, let's talk about the conversations we may not be having, right? So the AI ownership policy, the question of who owns AI generated outputs in a professional context, is not settled yet, right? It's still as the we seem to be slowing down a little bit, but it was working at a really, really fast pace, and it seems to be slowing down because um, uh, I'm just looking at some of my professional colleagues who are in the space or whatever. They seem to be slowing down a little bit. They're leveling out. They're leveling out. Um, um, but the way you handle it on day one shapes every conversation about IP that follows, right? And so, our Smart Biz Facts, we chart these reports of that include intellectual property, tangible and intangible assets, and how Smart Biz Facts, when you are composing a business valuation, how it's helpful and helps you to exit, right, the business asset, right? So, um, we believe in this conversation. We have contributed to this conversation and have services and products positioned around this conversation, right? So um, the core question. Okay, so what's the question? What's the question? Um, when someone on the team uses the firm's AI tools or their own AI tools for the firm's work, right? To generate strategy documents, code, design assets, prompt libraries, synthetic media, or training data. Who owns that output, right? So, um, let's BOMAQ talk it out, right? So maybe you may say, answer number one, you may say, the firm owns everything generated using firm tools or for firm clients. Clean, consistent, this can be put into the contract before any engagement at any level, whether it's an employee agreement, it's a subcontractor, a subconsultant vendor agreement. You can have it within your agreed. Firm owns everything. Using firm tools, firm clients, clean, consistent with traditional work for higher logic, right? So requires clear communication on day one and applies policy on what happens to a personal prompt library developed on firm time, the firm tools for the firm's clients, right? That's our that's our policy, right? We own everything. Um, uh, we probably modify it anyway. It has to go through before it even reaches a client or is put into um, use. we do an audit, a review, and a revamp anyway. Usually never goes out the way that it came in any case. Um, so even if it somehow there is a question that it becomes ours, right? Because we put our brand on it, our okay, like whoop, our stamp on it, right? So okay, so that's the answer number one. We like that one. Answer number two, the individual owns their personal prompt library and AI developed methodology, right? They've been playing with it, tinkering with it. They've been upskilling um, and themselves and making themselves more valuable as they become more tech literate. The firm owns specific client deliverables outside of what they brought to the table, right? More nuanced, more complex to administer, requires a definition of personal methodology versus the firm deliverable, right? But even under a contract that indicates everything generated using firm's tools for firm's clients and or um, on the firm's time. You know, you know, you can legal wordsmith it so that this answer number two still would be applicable, shift into there. And we have taken intellectual property course as part of our engineering management graduate degree. And so this area, um, along with the independent contractor and subconsultant position, is one of those things that is challenged. It's challenging. It has been challenged. It continues to be challenging, um, and uh, and so expect that to amplify as AI is being introduced into uh, integrated and hybrid organizations, right? So, um, answer number three. So, number two, we think we can handle that. We can handle that with a little bit of wordsmithing, legal legalese, right? And so then answer three, it depends, and you can sort it out case by case. This is the default in most organizations, right? They are not governing it. They're not holding themselves accountable. They're just uh, because the AI has disrupted every industry. They have not put into place a framework or infrastructure that kind of charts this process and makes sure um, that they're able to grow with these advancements, right? So it's a governance failure, waiting for a triggering event. So, when something happens, then they'll uh, begin to uh, create infrastructure and guardrails and policy around it. The time to make this decision, though, is day one, when the stakes are low and alignment is possible, not at the moment of departure because of what has happened. um, a violation has been or an offense has been created or had, and now it has to be dealt with um, in the heat of the moment. So when interests have diverged and assets have compounded, that's not really the moment to deal with it, right? It's day one. So AI IP on day one um, should be, if a well-developed prompt library built over 2 years of client work may be worth more than any single deliverable that person produced, right? Treat AI generated IP ownership as a day one documented policy, signed and acknowledged. Um, Silence on this question is not a neutral position. It's a dispute waiting to happen, right? So um, I can, yeah, that familiar with that type of situation and have visited that, um, had to create solutions for that particular situations, um, for human capital uh, many times, right? And so I'm expecting AI to amplify that, right? So we have this saying when it comes to process and workflows, um, test them out on small projects, and that's why we do a lot of BOMAQ talking it through. Um, and because once you work through a process or workflow on a small project, um, and it works, right? Then you can more times than not use those same processes and workflows on larger, um, and and take that as a grain of salt too, because there may be milestones where you say, okay, no, the process needs to change once we get past this benchmark, right? So, but the opposite is more damaging. If there is a problem on a small project that you have not worked through in terms of process, workflow, or otherwise, it amplifies on a bigger project. And I think this is the case here as well, is that if you have these systems in place for uh, human capital and those systems are working, um, we're of the opinion as you add AI, um, that it's easier to find your way because you have some really good systems in place. But if you don't have good systems in place, then AI is going to amplify those. And since AI um, is artificially intelligent, um, it knows that your systems are not working. And so it's just going to run rampant around, or whatever. And it's like a toddler just running around once they get out of the playpen. They're like, oh, woo, 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 woo. Let me get this, let me get that, let me get this, right? Yeah, so okay, so let's look at possibly some examples to make this even more applicable, right? So conceptually, every time you introduce a new piece of technology or deploy an AI assistant, you are creating a birth certificate for a digital entity, right? So uh, we have a couple uh, AI digital identities that we've introduced in the last 6 months, right? So we have Lingo Luna, who helps us at the Universal Language of Love, and in the management series, since this is it's coined the Universal Language of Management. So we have created this digital identity called the Lingo Luna, and so she is talent, production talent for video output, voiceover. Um, we haven't given her visual yet, but voiceover for content that we're producing there. We also have our sales, um, independent sales rep uh, talent, um, and I forget the name that we've uh, given her. And then we have two uh, talents that are male, right? And so Don't think we've given them a name, but they already have been operating in a digital identity, um, whether voiceover or in video, uh, as talent, for video production, right? So, um, uh, not as intense because their permissions are just limited to that project, right? Um, as we maybe expand their footprint, we may get into some of these issues. Um, but for now, those digital identities are limited by the program that we use to create them, um, and the output that we gave them. They only can say what we told them to say. Um, the image that they project is the one that the framework that the script that we compose for them, and the intent that we gave for the video output, right? So they can't go out there and just start saying whatever they want to say, or the video being produced. Um, and, of course, there are platforms that will produce um, videos autonomously. Um, we're not doing that yet. We still, we still have our finger on that. So, um, but yeah, uh, in this area. So let me bring it back. Let me bring it back. Okay, so um, this particular example, the conceptually, right? Every time you introduce a new piece of technology or deploy an AI assistant, you are creating a birth certificate for a digital entity. These This phase comes with the onboarding and those provisioning risks. So, say we're hiring our workforce development individual, right? And let's compare giving the AI assistant access to our data versus hiring a new workforce development person, a human to assist us. So the setup, uh, when creating a new AI scheduling tool, uh, we have to carefully um, consider provisions and access, right? Like we said, if you grant it too much access, the risk it might accidentally read sensitive personal tax documents in your shared drive just to answer a simple email, right? Whereas um, for a human, um, if they see a folder that says tax documents, or they may not even have access to that drive, right? Those items would be behind a digital firewall to which they would need a password or access to that area of um, a cloud space, or even um, an external drive space, right? So, but some of these AI tools can slip right in there because it's digital. Um, some kind of backdoor, some kind of loophole to be able to do that, right? Um, like indicated, our email right now is summarizing all of our conversations, and uh, where's the setup for that? to be able to um, have more oversight and monitor um, that, right? Because that data has to be stored somewhere. So now there's a summary of a conversation, email conversations I'm having somewhere in the cloud, somewhere with um, uh, somewhere I don't have access to, right? So, um, but the AI does, right? So the takeaway, provisioning means deciding exactly what an AI is allowed to do. Strict boundary setting during the onboarding process is the only way to protect assets from AI mistakes or unauthorized access. And, that's where we put on the Barney Rubble brakes, right? Um, because we're big, big, big on that. So another example, um, uh, conceptually, when onboarding that new workforce development individual, a vendor, or AI tool, you must give them access to company resources. Provisioning risks is the danger of accidentally giving a human or AI tool the keys to the entire company instead of their specific, in the human case, their job role, um, or project file, um, uh, or for the project team. Um, and with AI, and we're also giving them role definitions, right? So those role definitions will set the requirements for the boundaries and guardrails required for that digital identity, right? If there aren't already inherent uh, within the tool. Right? Um, so some workforce administrative examples, um, a workforce development, a new hire, onboarding a new apprentice involves creating their digital identity. If you over provision their access, that apprentice might accidentally view sensitive payroll spreadsheets or confidential bids for upcoming real estate developments on their mobile field app, right? Um, Administrative support, the AI scheduler risk. You deploy a new AI scheduling assistant to manage project meetings. If you give it a blanket access to the company's entire cloud drive, the AI might scan a confidential land acquisition contract just to find a date, accidentally leaking the purchase price to outside parties, doing a meeting recap, right? Embarrassing, embarrassing moment with consequences, right? So, subcontractor offboarding, there's a life cycle in at the end of a particular project. Usually, we like to have multiple subcontractors for a particular trade or area of interest. Same thing with subconsultants. And in um, lots of metropolitan cities that are sprawling out into rural areas, we can find lots of uh, um, subconsultants, subcontractors in various disciplines and trades to be able to do that, right? Um, and and because you're able to do that, you may be alternating project teams. You stack your teams. You may have three or four different teams as the ebbs and flows of work kind of comes through. And so at some point, the life cycle may end. This may be for that project. It might be for that subcontractor. You decide, hey, this is our last project we're doing together. We are going up in scale. Maybe we're instead of doing 5,000 square feet retail build outs, we're going to 10 to 20,000. We're going to the malls, right? And so we need to, the life cycle might end for that a subcontractor and we're offboarding. And so a drywall subcontractor finishes their phase of the project and leaves the site. Um, if their digital identity is not properly decommissioned or revoked, their automated access to the job site trailer or the digital drawings or blueprints remains active, creating a massive security blind spot. And this also applies, seen this with master keys, right? Master, you get the master key to a building after occupancy, owner occupancy, subcontractors or general contractor has the master key, and now they can open up all the doors after you've already occupied the building. Those needs to be turned over or changed, locks changed, and master keys turned over, right? And so, um, just a couple examples where there are um, provisioning risks that already are inherent in the work. It's already there. You add AI, it increases, right? Uh, uh, so the active governance period, right? So next Friday, we're going to stage two. We just finished up stage one of five, right? And so next Friday, we'll get into stage two, the active governance period, the longest and least managed phase of the life cycle, right? We go into this privilege creep and its AI counterpart and permission drift and fun stuff, right? Fun stuff, fun stuff, fun stuff. And so we introduce a workflow that most organizations haven't considered. So using AI itself to audit AI access, AI, because at a speed that a human cannot detect. So now how good you are. I'm a human detector. Okay. Yeah, AI runs circles around us, right? So we need AI to audit AI access. So where it's moving into intelligently into spaces to which we can't see, we can have our intelligent AI moving along right with it to create to work on our behalf, right? Um, so BOMAQtalk, that's our Friday edition this Friday. See you next Friday.